Moscow, November 1983. The city breathed in shallow gasps. Snow fell like ash, muffling footsteps, voices, even thoughts. On television, General Secretary Yuri Andropov warned of imperialist aggression. In supermarkets, shelves stood empty, except for rows of pickled beets and tins of Baltic sprats no one wanted. Dmitri Sokolov was not a dissident. Not a scientist. He was a 34-year-old inventory clerk at GUM department store, responsible for tracking stock levels of men's footwear, wool socks, and imported wristwatches. His tools, a mechanical calculator, carbon copy ledgers, and the eyes that noticed when numbers didn't add up. On November 2, he recorded a discrepancy. Section 7B, Luxury Imports, showed zero stock of Swiss watches. But the delivery log listed 120 units received that week. He asked his supervisor. "The paperwork is correct," came the reply. "Don't overthink." That night, Dmitri walked home through Red Square. Tourists snapped photos of St. Basil's. Soldiers stood rigid near Lenin's mausoleum. And on every newsstand, the same headline, "NATO war games begin, SS-20s on alert." He didn't know it yet, but the missing watches were just the first thread. And pulling it would lead him into the quiet heart of a system built on lies. Dmitri had learned early, in the USSR, truth wasn't spoken, it was inferred. His father, a railway engineer, had been reassigned to Siberia in 1968 for asking why coal shipments to Czechoslovakia doubled overnight. His mother never spoke of it again. So Dmitri kept his head down. He filled his ledgers neatly. He smiled at party inspectors. He queued for bread like everyone else. But he also kept a second notebook, bound in plain brown paper, hidden behind a loose brick in his apartment wall. In it, he recorded anomalies. November 3, 50 kilograms of Cuban coffee delivered to GUM. 0 entered in sales ledger. November 5, 200 pairs of Italian leather shoes, vanished from storage, no receipt. November 7, a man in a black Volga watched the staff entrance for 3 hours. He didn't call it corruption. He called it the gap. One evening, an elderly cashier named Galina slipped him a note, "They take what they want. We pretend not to see. That's how we survive." Dmitri nodded. But that night, he added a new line to his notebook. "Survival isn't enough." By late November, tensions peaked. NATO's Able Archer 83 exercise simulated a nuclear first strike. Soviet radar stations went on high alert. Civilians were told to prepare civil defense kits. At GUM, something shifted. Luxury goods vanished entirely. But Dmitri noticed something odd. The store's basement loading dock saw more nighttime activity than ever. Trucks arrived after midnight, no logos, no manifests. Men in civilian clothes unloaded crates marked medical supplies. One night, Dmitri stayed late, pretending to audit winter coats. As a truck backed in, he glimpsed inside, not bandages, but boxes of French perfume, Japanese cameras, American jeans. He didn't report it. Instead, he began mapping patterns. Trucks always arrived on nights when Politburo members attended Bolshoi performances. Drivers used license plates registered to Ministry of Health subsidiaries. Security guards turned away at exactly 11:47 p.m. This wasn't random theft. It was a system. And someone high up was running it. Dmitri knew better than to investigate openly. So he used his job as cover. As an inventory clerk, he could request stock verification for any department. He started with cosmetics. Routine check, he'd say, clipboard in hand. While counting lipstick tubes, he'd note which brands disappeared fastest: Chanel, Dior, Yves Saint Laurent. All unavailable to the public, yet constantly out of stock. He befriended a young janitor, Sasha, who cleaned offices on the third floor, the administrative wing. Over shared cigarettes, Sasha mentioned, "The deputy director gets deliveries every Friday. Big boxes. Smells like flowers." Dmitri didn't react. But that weekend, he took the tram to Arbot Street. Outside a discreet boutique with no sign, he saw a familiar face, Gum's deputy director, handing a woman a shopping bag. No words were exchanged. Just a nod. A smile. A transaction in silence. December brought deeper cold, and deeper fear. The U.S. deployed Pershing II missiles in West Germany. Soviet media called it the countdown to Armageddon. Yet in Moscow's elite circles, life continued: caviar at Metropole, ballet at the Bolshoi, black market cognac in private dachas. Dmitri's notebook grew heavier. He now had names, dates, routes. But he also knew the risk. In 1982, a Leningrad librarian had been arrested for spreading false economic data after noting discrepancies in bread distribution. So he changed tactics. Instead of collecting proof, he began testing the system. He submitted a fake requisition form for 10 units of Swiss watches, Party Congress gift allocation. It was approved within hours. No questions. Then he filed another, 50 bottles of French perfume, KGB cultural exchange program. Also approved. The system wasn't just corrupt. It was automatic. Greed had become bureaucracy. One freezing morning in January 1984, Dmitri found a new notice pinned to the staff bulletin board. All inventory records from November 1 to December 31, 1983, to be archived immediately. Originals only. Carbon copies destroyed. His blood ran cold. They knew. That night, he didn't go home. He went to the public library on Mokovaya Street. In the microfilm room, he spent hours copying pages from Izvestia and Pravda, not for news, but for ads. Buried among tractor manuals and sewing machine offers were tiny classifieds. Swiss timepieces. Discreet. Call 3-45-67. Authentic Chanel No. 5. Limited stock. He cross-referenced phone prefixes with known party housing blocks. The sellers weren't criminals. They were insiders. As he left the library, snow falling softly, he realized, the truth wasn't hidden in secret files. It was hiding in plain sight, in the gaps between what was said and what was sold. Dmitri stopped writing in his notebook. Paper was too dangerous. Instead, he memorized. He turned numbers into rhythms, like the ticking of a watch he'd never own. 120 watches. 50 kilos coffee. 200 shoes. Truck on Bolshoi nights. License plate M734. Guard shift change, 1147. He recited them while queuing for milk, riding the metro, even during mandatory political lectures. To others, he looked bored. In truth, he was building an archive in his mind. One day, Galina the cashier handed him a sugar packet. Inside, a slip of paper, "They're watching you. Be careful." He smiled, thanked her, and dissolved the note in his tea that evening. But her warning stuck. He began leaving false trails, filing requisitions for departments he didn't audit, asking about stock in stores he'd never visited. If they were watching, let them chase ghosts. In February, Andropov died. Chernenko took over, a frail old man who coughed through speeches. The war scare faded from headlines. But the trucks kept coming. Dmitri noticed a new pattern. Deliveries now included Western electronics, Sony Walkmans, Polaroid cameras, IBM typewriters. Items not just for luxury, but for control. He learned that regional party secretaries used these goods to reward loyalty. A factory manager who met quotas got a Japanese stereo. A school principal who reported anti-Soviet sentiment received Italian leather boots. The system wasn't just stealing from the people. It was buying silence. One evening, Sasha the janitor whispered, "My cousin in Minsk says they're doing the same there." Even in Baku. Dmitri nodded. It wasn't just Moscow. It was the whole Union. A parallel economy, running on theft and fear. Spring came late in 1984. Mud replaced snow. Hope, however, remained frozen. Dmitri knew he couldn't expose this alone. But he also knew, truth didn't need a megaphone. Sometimes, it just needed a witness. He began sharing fragments, not as accusations, but as questions. At the tram stop, "Did you hear they got French wine at the Metropole again?" In the bread line, "Strange how some stores have everything, and others nothing." People would glance around, then nod. No one spoke openly. But eyes met longer. Shoulders relaxed slightly. He wasn't spreading dissent. He was rebuilding trust, one quiet conversation at a time. In May, a miracle happened. Not political. Personal. A young American journalist, posing as a tourist, slipped Dmitri a note during a guided tour of GUM, "I'm writing about Soviet consumer life. If you have stories, leave a red scarf on your balcony Tuesday night." Dmitri almost laughed. A red scarf? How naive. But that night, he thought, what if someone is listening beyond our borders? He didn't hang the scarf. Instead, he went to the U.S. Embassy's public library, the one foreigners could enter. There, he left a book on a shelf, Dr. Zhivago. Inside, a single page marked with a pencil dot next to the line, "The truth is always new." He never knew if it was found. But weeks later, a small article appeared in the Washington Post. Behind the empty shelves, a parallel economy thrives in Soviet elite circles. No names. No proof. Just enough to make Moscow nervous. By summer, pressure mounted. Inspectors visited GUM weekly. Dmitri was transferred to the glove department, for operational efficiency. His access to import logs ended. But he didn't stop. He simply changed his focus. Now, he watched people. The way a deputy minister's wife wore a new Cartier watch to a state function. How a KGB officer's son showed off a Nike jacket at Gorky Park. The nervous glances when Western brands were mentioned. He realized, the system's weakness wasn't greed. It was vanity. They couldn't resist showing off what they stole. And in doing so, they revealed the lie at the heart of the USSR. We are all equal. We share equally. We need nothing from the West. But their wrists, their feet, their children's backs told a different story. Dmitri Sokolov never became a hero. He wasn't arrested. He didn't defect. He didn't publish a memoir. He stayed at GUM until 1991. When the Soviet Union collapsed, he quietly retired to a dacha outside Tver. Years later, a historian tracking the shadow economy of the 1980s interviewed him. "Why didn't you speak out?" she asked. Dmitri stirred his tea and said, "In a country built on lies, the most radical act is to notice the truth, and refuse to look away." His notebook was long gone. But his memory remained. And in the end, that was enough. Because empires fall not when heroes rise, but when ordinary people stop pretending.